The Galactic Relief Consortium had existed for over 3 centuries, binding together 1,000 peaceful worlds in mutual aid and protection. Its charter promised swift assistance to any member world in distress, a promise that had rarely been tested until the day Ambassador Rova's transmission broke through 17 layers of encrypted channels. The hologram flickered, revealing the ambassador's translucent skin stretched thin over a delicate bone structure. Her 4 eyes, violet orbs designed for the soft twilight of her homeworld, blinked rapidly in distress. Behind her, the crystalline architecture of the Solari embassy trembled under distant impacts. "This is Ambassador Rova of the Solari Confederation," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wailing alarms. "The Zyron hordes have breached our outer defenses. 3 colony worlds have already fallen. Our people—" A thunderous explosion drowned her words. When the image stabilized, blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, its silvery droplets catching the emergency lights. "Our people are dying. We are not warriors. Please, someone help us." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the assembled coalition representatives in stunned silence. None moved to respond. None volunteered aid. None except the humans. Captain Mara Kincaid stood on the bridge of the human warship Ironblood, her scarred hands gripping the railing as she replayed the distress call for the 5th time. The Solari weren't just pacifists. They were physically incapable of violence. Their neural pathways evolved for cooperation rather than conflict. And the Zyron. Everyone knew what the Zyron did to worlds that couldn't defend themselves. "Command says to maintain position," Lieutenant Jax Varen reported, his dark eyes carefully neutral. "The Coalition is assessing the situation," Kincaid snorted. "They'll be assessing while the Solari are being slaughtered." She tapped her neural implant, bringing up star charts. "How long to reach the Solari homeworld?" "Captain," Varen lowered his voice, "we're the only warship defending this sector. If we leave—" "How long, Lieutenant?" Varen sighed. 4 days at maximum burn." "Plot the course." Kincaid turned to face her bridge crew, 30 men and women who, like her, had been born and raised on Earth's harshest remaining habitable zones. Deathworlders, the Coalition called them. Savages, when they thought humans couldn't hear. "The Coalition won't help the Solari," Kincaid announced. "Not in time, but we will. Prep for immediate departure." "Against orders?" Varen asked, though his fingers were already programming the navigation computer. Kincaid's smile was cold. "Consider it a creative interpretation of standing orders to protect Coalition interests." As the Ironblood prepared to break orbit, Kincaid retired to her quarters. The walls were bare, except for a single photograph. A family homestead on the volcanic plains of New Kilimanjaro, where she'd grown up harvesting heat-resistant fungi and hunting predators that could dissolve human flesh with a touch. Her childhood had been a daily battle for survival. The Solari had never known such hardship. But they were about to learn what it meant to have Deathworlders fighting on their side. The Ironblood tore through hyperspace, burning fuel at rates that would have horrified Coalition accountants. In the ship's training bay, Sergeant Lyra, Spike, Thorne drilled the Marine contingent relentlessly. "The Zyron aren't like us," she barked at her squad. 6 limbs, chitinous armor, distributed nervous system. Headshots won't drop them. You need to hit the thoracic cluster or the abdominal nerve bundle. She slapped a holographic projection, highlighting vulnerable points on the alien anatomy. "And they don't take prisoners." A young Marine raised his hand. "I heard they eat their captives alive." "Not if we kill them first," Spike replied, with a feral grin that showed her filed teeth, a cosmetic modification popular among those raised in the Australian exclusion zone. "We're bringing some special toys for this party." On the ship's lower decks, engineers worked double shifts modifying weapon systems. Standard Coalition protocols prohibited excessive force, a restriction that had never sat well with humans who'd evolved on a world where everything from the weather to the microbes tried to kill them daily. Lieutenant Varen found Kincaid in the armory, inspecting a crate of modified grenades. "Those aren't Coalition approved," he observed. "These are volcanic slag bombs," Kincaid explained, holding up a metallic sphere. "Filled with superheated magma from Mount Erebus. When they detonate, they spray molten rock that burns at over 1,000 degrees Celsius. The Xyron's chitin won't stand a chance." Varen frowned. "The Solari asked for help, not war crimes." "The Solari asked to be saved." Kincaid sealed the crate. "I don't think they'll complain about our methods when we're pulling Xyron corpses off their children." Tension hung between them, thick as the methane storms of Jupiter's colonies. Varen had been raised on one of Earth's few remaining pristine enclaves, places where humanity pretended they weren't descended from apex predators. He believed in the Coalition's principles of minimum force and proportional response. "You requested this posting," Kincaid reminded him. "You wanted to see how the Deathworlders do things. Well, watch and learn, Lieutenant, because where we're going, Coalition rules won't save anyone." The Ironblood dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of the Solari system. Sensors immediately detecting the aftermath of slaughter. Debris fields where space stations had once orbited, the blackened husks of civilian transports, and Xyron hunter ships pursuing a limping Solari refugee vessel. "Battle stations," Kincaid ordered, her voice ice-cold. "Target the lead hunter ship. All weapons. Full barrage." The Ironblood's response was immediate and overwhelming. Rail cannons accelerated tungsten slugs to relativistic speeds, punching through the hunter ship's shields and hull in the same instant. Plasma torpedoes followed, turning the crippled vessel into an expanding cloud of superheated gas. The second hunter ship veered away, attempting to flee, but the Ironblood's targeting systems had already locked on. It died just as quickly as the first. "Solari vessel is hailing us, Captain," the communications officer reported. The view screen revealed a crowded transport bridge, packed with Solari civilians. Their pilot, barely more than a teenager by their species standards, stared in shock at the human vessel. "You destroyed them," she whispered. "Just destroyed them." "We did," Kincaid confirmed. "Are there more of your people on board?" 217, the pilot replied. "Refugees from Solari 3. The Xyron. They burned everything, everyone. We're all that's left." Kincaid's jaw tightened. "We'll escort you to safety. Then, we're heading to your homeworld. Is Ambassador Rova still alive?" "Last we heard, she was coordinating evacuations from the capital." "Good. We'll need someone who can tell your people not to fear us." Kincaid cut the transmission and turned to Varen. "Deploy boarding parties to secure that transport. I want every Solari survivor debriefed. We need to know exactly what we're flying into." The Marine teams, led by Sergeant Thorne, found more than just traumatized refugees on the Solari vessel. Hidden in its cargo hold were 3 Xyron infiltrators, their chitinous bodies folded into maintenance compartments, waiting to emerge once the ship reached safety. The resulting firefight was brief and brutal. Spike returned to the Ironblood with blood, both silver and green, splattered across her battle armor. She dropped a severed Xyron limb on the briefing room table. "They're wearing some kind of new exoskeletal enhancement," she reported. "Makes their already tough hide nearly impervious to standard rounds. Had to use the thermal lances to cut through." Kincaid examined the limb. "Looks like we'll need to adjust our approach. What did you learn from the survivors?" "The Xyron hit without warning. Dropped some kind of organic spores into the atmosphere that paralyzed most of the population. Then landed harvester units." Spike's expression darkened. "They're not just killing, Captain. They're processing, converting Solari biomass into nutrient paste to feed their larvae." A collective silence fell over the briefing room. Even Varen, with his Coalition sensibilities, couldn't maintain his usual detachment. "How many ships in their fleet?" Kincaid finally asked. "At least 30. with one command vessel nearly the size of a small moon. They're methodically working through the system, planet by planet. Kincaid nodded. Then, we need to hit them before they establish a stronger foothold. Navigation. Set course for Solari Prime. Weapons. I want every destructive capability we have prepped and ready. Engineering. Divert power from life support if you have to. I want shields at double capacity. As the Ironblood accelerated toward the heart of the Solari system, Kincaid addressed her entire crew over the ship-wide comm. We all joined Earth's fleet for different reasons. Some for adventure, some for escape, some because our homeworlds trained us from birth to fight and survive where others would perish. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Coalition calls us Deathworlders like it's something to be ashamed of. But today, being forged in Earth's crucible makes us the only hope for a species that never had to evolve teeth or claws or the will to use them. Today, we bring war to those who prey on the defenseless. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when humanity's darkest gift, our capacity for violence, is unleashed for a righteous cause. The speech wasn't necessary. Her crew would follow orders regardless. But Kincaid knew the value of purpose. Humans fought harder, endured more, when they believed their savagery served something beyond itself. As the Ironblood approached Solari Prime, the full extent of the invasion became clear. The once pristine world, famous for its crystal forests and bioluminescent oceans, was scarred with impact craters and burning cities. Xiron ships formed a blockade around the planet, while ground forces advanced methodically across its surface. No sign of Coalition defenders, Varen noted grimly. They're still assessing, Kincaid replied. Tactical. What's our best approach? The tactical officer, a woman from the Neptune deep mining colonies with skin permanently tinged blue from pressure adaptations, studied her displays. Their fleet is concentrated on the day side of the planet. If we swing around the night side, we could deploy ground forces before they detect us. And do what with one ship against 30? Varen asked. Kincaid smiled thinly. We don't have to defeat their fleet. We just need to buy time for reinforcements. If we can establish a foothold and protect key Solari leadership, the Coalition will eventually be shamed into responding. That's a big if, Captain. Got a better idea, Lieutenant? When Varen didn't respond, Kincaid nodded to the tactical officer. Night side insertion it is. Prepare dropships. I want Sergeant Thorne's Marines ready for immediate deployment once we break atmosphere. The Ironblood slipped past the Xiron blockade. Its advanced stealth systems, another modification that pushed Coalition regulations to their limit, masking its approach. As they entered Solari Prime's atmosphere, the ship's sensors detected a pocket of resistance in what remained of the capital city. Life signs? Kincaid demanded. Approximately 3,000 Solari concentrated in the central government complex. The sensor operator reported. Xiron forces are surrounding the area, but haven't breached the inner defenses yet. That's our target. All hands, prepare for combat drop. The Ironblood descended through cloud cover, its hull glowing red with atmospheric friction. When it emerged, hovering over the besieged government complex, the effect was like a metal god appearing from the heavens. Dropships deployed from its belly, while covering fire from the main vessel sent nearby Xiron units, scrambling for cover. Kincaid led the ground assault personally, against Varen's strenuous objections. The captain belongs on the bridge, he had argued. Not this captain, not this mission, she'd replied, checking the seals on her combat armor. The Solari need to see a human face, not just our weapons. Now, as her boots hit the crystal-paved central plaza of the Solari capital, Kincaid surveyed the devastation with a soldier's eye. The Solari had tried to barricade themselves using decorative pillars and overturned vehicles, the desperate improvisation of a species with no concept of fortification. It was a miracle they'd held out this long. Sergeant Thorne's Marines fanned out, establishing a perimeter while medics rushed to tend to the wounded Solari. Kincaid approached a group of what appeared to be officials, their ceremonial robes torn and stained. "I'm Captain Mara Kincaid of the Earth vessel Ironblood," she announced. "We received Ambassador Rova's distress call." One of the Solari stepped forward, her movements graceful despite her exhaustion. It took Kincaid a moment to recognize Ambassador Rova from the transmission. The diplomat's face was gaunt, her luminous skin dulled by dust and despair. "Captain Kincaid," Rova's voice trembled. "You came. Only you came." "The coalition is mobilizing," Kincaid lied smoothly. "We're the advance force. What's your situation?" Rova gestured to the huddled masses behind her. "These are all that remain of our government and as many civilians as we could shelter. The Zyron have taken the rest. Harvested them, as they call it." Her voice broke. "Our defenses will fail within hours." "Not anymore," Kincaid assured her. "My ship will provide air support, and my Marines will hold this position. Do you have a secure bunker where we can establish a command center?" Before Rova could answer, the ground shook with a massive impact. Zyron drop pods were landing beyond the perimeter, disgorging waves of armored warriors. "Incoming!" Sergeant Thorne shouted. "Multiple vectors!" Kincaid grabbed Rova's arm, pulling her toward the nearest building. "Get your people inside, now!" The battle for the Solari capital began in earnest, a desperate holding action against overwhelming odds. Human Marines, with their Deathworlder reflexes and modified weapons, exacted a terrible toll on the first wave of Zyron attackers. Volcanic slag grenades turned chitinous armor to ash. Acid-spitting drones, based on the biology of Earth's most lethal insects, found gaps in Zyron exoskeletons. But the Zyron kept coming, wave after wave, their hive mind tactics adapting to human strategies faster than Kincaid had anticipated. In the makeshift command center established in the Solari government's inner sanctum, Kincaid received increasingly dire reports from her forces. Southern perimeter breached," a Marine sergeant reported over comms. "We've fallen back to secondary positions, but we're running low on ammo. Eastern sector holding, but they're bringing up some kind of organic artillery." Another voice crackled. "Looks like they're loading spore canisters." Kincaid turned to Rova, who was helping tend to wounded Solari civilians. "Those spores, your people mentioned them before. What exactly do they do?" Rova's hands trembled as she applied a healing membrane to a child's injury. "They attack our nervous system. Paralysis comes first. Then, awareness remains while the body is processed. It is how they feed." Kincaid's expression hardened. "Lieutenant Varen," she called to her second-in-command, who was coordinating with the Ironblood in orbit. "Tell the ship to target any Zyron artillery positions with plasma torpedoes. Full dispersal pattern." "Captain," Varen hesitated. "Plasma dispersal in an atmosphere will create a firestorm. The city is already lost," Kincaid finished for him. "We're just trying to save its people now. Do it." Minutes later, the sky above the capital turned to fire as the Ironblood unleashed hell. Expanding plasma spheres consumed Zyron positions, along with everything else in their radius. Ancient crystal towers, the pride of Solari architecture, melted and shattered. The screams of dying Zyron warriors were matched by the groans of collapsing infrastructure. But it bought them time. "The coalition must have received our transmissions by now," Varen said, joining Kincaid at a viewpoint overlooking the burning city. "Where are they?" As if in answer, the command center's communications array pinged with an incoming transmission. Kincaid activated it, expecting, hoping for, news of an inbound coalition fleet. Instead, a reptilian face filled the screen. Ambassador Thex of the Marl Confederation, the coalition's current administrative chair. "Captain Kincaid," the ambassador's forked tongue flickered anxiously. "The Coalition Council has reviewed your unauthorized intervention. While you were reviewing, Ambassador, the Solari were dying," Kincaid replied coldly. "Yes, well, Thex looked uncomfortable. The Council has determined that the Zyron incursion represents a clear violation of Coalition space. A response fleet has been authorized. Hope flared briefly in Kincaid's chest. How soon can we expect reinforcements? The fleet will depart within 14 standard days, once all member contributions have been processed and integrated. 14 days? Kincaid couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. Ambassador, we won't last 14 hours. Thex's scales shifted in the reptilian equivalent of a shrug. The Coalition operates by consensus. Captain, many members are concerned about escalation. The Zyron have never directly challenged a unified Coalition response before. There are diplomatic considerations. Kincaid cut the transmission without bothering to respond. She turned to find Rova standing behind her, having overheard everything. Your Coalition will not save us, the ambassador said softly. It wasn't a question. Not in time, Kincaid admitted. But we're not done fighting. Why? Rova asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Why do you humans risk everything for us? The Coalition calls Earth a death world, says your species evolved through constant violence. You have no obligation to die for us. Kincaid considered the question. On Earth, the strong protect the weak. It's part of who we are. Even at the cost of your own lives? Especially then. Kincaid turned as Sergeant Thorne entered the command center, her armor dented and scored with acid burns. Report, Sergeant. They're regrouping for another push, Thorne said. But something's changed. Their command ship has entered orbit. It's enormous. Captain. Makes the Iron Blood look like a shuttlecraft. Kincaid activated the tactical display. The Zyron command vessel dwarfed everything around it, a grotesque hybrid of technology and organic matter, bristling with weapons. Can the Iron Blood take it out? Thorne shook her head. Not a chance. The weapon yields would be like throwing rocks at a mountain. A cold calculation formed in Kincaid's mind. What about from the inside? The plan came together in minutes, born of desperation and the unique human talent for creative destruction. The Iron Blood would create a diversion, drawing the attention of the Zyron fleet, while a single dropship, loaded with Kincaid's best Marines and enough explosives to level a city, would slip through the chaos. It's a one-way mission, Varen argued. None of you will make it back. If that ship starts deploying its full arsenal, none of us will survive anyway, Kincaid countered. At least this way, the Solari have a chance. Sergeant Thorne volunteered immediately. My Marines are ready, Captain. We'll make it count. Kincaid shook her head. I need you here, Sergeant. The ground forces need your leadership if this fails. She looked around the command center, making eye contact with each of her officers. I'll lead the strike team myself. Varen stepped forward. Then I'm going with you. Lieutenant! With respect. Captain, you'll need a pilot who can get you through their defenses, and I'm the best you've got. His expression softened slightly. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't enjoy the violence too much. Coalition regulations and all. For the first time since the mission began, Kincaid smiled genuinely. Wouldn't want to violate regulations, Lieutenant. Ambassador Rova watched the humans prepare with a mixture of awe and horror. Their casual acceptance of self-sacrifice, their methodical preparation for violence, it was alien to her in the most fundamental sense. Yet, she could not deny the fierce hope their presence had kindled. If you succeed, she said to Kincaid, as the captain checked her weapons one final time, my people will owe yours a debt we can never repay. Just build something better from the ashes, Kincaid replied. That'll be payment enough. The assault on the Zyron command ship unfolded like a descent into nightmare. The Iron Blood erupted from its defensive position around the capital, guns blazing, drawing a swarm of Zyron vessels in pursuit. In the chaos, a single dropship, its heat signature masked by experimental stealth technology, slipped through the battle lines. Lieutenant Varen piloted with preternatural skill, weaving through debris fields and energy blasts. Behind him, Kincaid and a dozen hardened Marines braced for impact as they approached the command ship's outer hull. "No docking ports," Varen observed tensely. "We're going to have to make our own." "Do it," Kincaid ordered. The dropship accelerated to ramming speed. Its reinforced prow aimed at a section of the command ship that sensors indicated might be thinner than the rest. The impact was jarring, metal screaming against metal as the dropship tore through layers of hull plating before grinding to a halt, wedged in the breach it had created. Emergency force fields snapped into place, preventing explosive decompression. Kincaid was first through the shattered cockpit, assault rifle raised. The interior of the Xiron vessel was unlike anything in human experience, pulsing organic matter interwoven with mechanical components, the walls themselves seeming to breathe. "Life support is nominal, but I wouldn't take off your helmets," Varen advised, checking his scanner. "The atmosphere is high in methane and sulfur compounds. Keeps out unwanted visitors," one of the Marines muttered. "We're very unwanted," Kincaid replied. "Let's move. Central control should be toward the core." They advanced through twisting corridors that seemed to reshape themselves, encountering sporadic resistance from Xiron warriors. The fighting was vicious, close quarters, exactly the conditions that favored human Deathworlders. What the Xiron possessed in natural armor and strength, the humans countered with speed, adaptability, and a willingness to absorb punishment that shocked even their enemies. 3 Marines fell in the first engagement, their bodies torn apart by Xiron claws. Another 2 were lost when they triggered a hidden defense system that flooded a chamber with corrosive gas. But the humans pressed on, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. "We're getting close," Varen reported, consulting his scanner. "Massive energy readings ahead. Has to be the central hub." Kincaid nodded. Her armor was breached in multiple places, blood seeping from a deep gash across her ribcage. The stimulants in her system kept the pain at bay, but she knew her body was approaching its limits. "How are the charges?" "Armed and ready," one of the remaining Marines confirmed, patting the heavy backpack of explosives he carried. "Just need to reach the core." The final approach to the command center became a blur of violence. Xiron defenders grew more numerous, more desperate. Kincaid lost track of how many she killed, how many times her shields flared as they absorbed energy blasts meant to vaporize her. Her world narrowed to the next target, the next corridor, the inexorable push forward. Then suddenly, they were there, a vast spherical chamber dominated by a pulsing crystalline structure that could only be the ship's brain and power source combined. Xiron commanders, larger and more ornately armored than the warriors they'd faced, turned in surprise at the human intrusion. In the center, towering over the others, stood what could only be Overlord Xiron himself, double the size of his subordinates, with armor that gleamed with an oily iridescence. "Impossible!" the Overlord hissed. The words translated by the humans' combat systems. "No prey species has ever breached a command ship." "We're not prey," Kincaid replied, raising her weapon. "We're the apex predators you should have never provoked." What followed was chaos. The Marines scattered, taking up positions around the chamber, laying down covering fire as the demolitions expert rushed toward the crystal core. Varen fought his way to a control console, interfacing his systems with the Xiron technology to disrupt their communications. Kincaid found herself face to face with Overlord Xiron. His segmented limbs lashed out with blistering speed, one catching her across the chest and sending her flying across the chamber. She slammed into a wall, her armor cracking further, the taste of blood filling her mouth. "I will keep you alive," the Overlord promised, advancing on her. "Study your species. Learn what makes you fight when you should submit." Kincaid spat blood and rose to her feet. "Here's your first lesson," she growled, and launched herself at him. They collided in a flurry of blows, human adaptability against alien strength. Kincaid's combat implants pushed her reflexes beyond normal human limits, allowing her to anticipate and counter the Overlord's attacks. But each blow she landed seemed to do minimal damage against his reinforced exoskeleton. Across the chamber, the Demolition's Marine reached the crystal core, slapping explosive charges against its surface. "Charges set!" he shouted. 2 minutes to detonation!" The Overlord's attention shifted for a split second, and Kincaid seized her opportunity. She drove her combat knife into a joint in his armor, where sensors had indicated a nerve cluster might be located. The blade sank deep, and the Overlord emitted a high-pitched keening sound that made the human's audio systems screech with feedback. "Fall back," Kincaid ordered her remaining troops. "Get to the extraction point." But even as she gave the command, she knew there would be no extraction. The dropship was crippled, and the Ironblood, if it still survived, was engaged in its own desperate battle. This had always been a suicide mission. Lieutenant Varen appeared at her side, helping her toward the exit as the wounded Overlord thrashed behind them. 1 minute to detonation, he reported grimly. "We need to get as far from the core as possible." They made it 3 corridors away before the Overlord caught up to them, his movements jerky, but driven by rage. 2 more Marines died, buying seconds with their lives. Kincaid and Varen kept moving, the lieutenant half carrying his captain as her injuries took their toll. 30 seconds, Varen panted. Far enough, Kincaid decided, slumping against a wall. This section has auxiliary shielding. Might survive the initial blast. Unlikely, Varen replied, but he took up position beside her, weapon raised as Zyron warriors closed in from both directions. "Been an honor, Lieutenant," Kincaid said. Varen's smile was tight. "Likewise, Captain, though I still think we violated at least 17 Coalition protocols." "Worth it," Kincaid murmured as the countdown in her helmet display reached 0. The explosion began at the core and rippled outward. A chain reaction as the crystal's energy was released all at once. The command ship's structure, partly organic, seemed to scream as it was torn apart from within. Secondary explosions followed as weapon systems and power relays overloaded. In the armored corridor, Kincaid and Varen were thrown against the walls as emergency force fields struggled and failed to contain the devastation. The last thing Kincaid saw before blackness took her was the ceiling tearing open, revealing the stars beyond. She never expected to see stars again. Consciousness returned slowly, painfully. Kincaid became aware first of the antiseptic smell of a medical bay, then the steady beep of monitoring equipment. When she finally forced her eyes open, she found herself looking up at a Coalition medical ceiling, the distinctive pale blue that was supposed to have calming properties for most species. "Welcome back, Captain." Kincaid turned her head, wincing at the pain, to find Ambassador Rova seated beside her bed. The Solari diplomat looked different. Her translucent skin bore faint scars, and her posture was no longer the perfect grace that her species was known for. "How?" Kincaid's voice was a dry rasp. "Lieutenant Varen activated your armor's emergency beacon before the end," Rova explained, offering a cup of water. "When the command ship exploded, it created a cascade failure throughout the Zyron fleet. Their ships began destroying each other, some kind of fail-safe to prevent technology capture, we believe." Kincaid took a careful sip. "The Ironblood, my crew. Your ship survived, though heavily damaged. Sergeant Thorne led a rescue mission when your beacon activated. They found you and the lieutenant in an intact section of debris, barely alive." Rova's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of emotional distress in her species. "Many of your people died, Captain. On the ground, in space. The cost was terrible. But your world survived." "Yes." Rova set the cup down. "The Coalition fleet arrived 3 days after the command ship's destruction. They've been helping with reconstruction, medical aid, acting as though they responded promptly to our distress call. Kincaid couldn't help but laugh, though it sent fresh pain through her bandaged torso. Politics. Some things are universal. Indeed, Rova hesitated. There is concern among some coalition members about the methods your people employed. The weapons you used violated several treaty provisions. Did they expect us to ask the Zyron nicely to stop harvesting your people? Some did. Yes. Rova's tone held a new edge, something that hadn't been there before the invasion. They call for sanctions against Earth, restrictions on human military deployments. Kincaid struggled to sit up. After we saved an entire species while they debated? Politics. Rova echoed Kincaid's earlier observation. But not all feel this way. My government has formally requested human military advisors. We wish to learn. Defense. The request startled Kincaid. The Solari had been committed pacifists for their entire history. Your people want to learn to fight? We want to learn to survive, Rova corrected. There is a difference, though perhaps a subtle one. We have lived in the belief that the universe rewards gentleness. Now, we understand that gentleness must sometimes be protected by strength. She reached out, her slender fingers hovering over Kincaid's scarred hand. Will you help us find the balance, Captain? To develop enough of your Deathworlder instincts without losing ourselves? Before Kincaid could answer, the medical bay door slid open, admitting Lieutenant Varen. He moved stiffly, one arm in a regeneration sleeve, but he was alive, more than she had dared hope. Captain, he greeted her with a nod. Good to see you conscious. Likewise, Lieutenant. I hear I have you to thank for that. Varen shrugged his good shoulder. Standard procedure. Never leave a commanding officer behind, even when she volunteers for suicide missions. Rova rose gracefully. I will leave you two to discuss military matters. Please consider my request. Captain Kincaid, my people need teachers who understand both the necessity of force and its cost. She departed with the fluid movement, characteristic of her species, though Kincaid noticed a new purposefulness in her stride. She's changed, Varen observed, taking the seat Rova had vacated. War changes everyone it touches, Kincaid replied. What's our status? The Ironblood is undergoing repairs at the Coalition shipyard. Spike, Sergeant Thorne, has been promoted to acting executive officer in your absence. The surviving Marines have been granted extended shore leave on Silari Prime. Varen's expression turned serious. The Coalition Council wants to speak with you once you're recovered. There are questions about our tactics. Let them question. Kincaid closed her eyes briefly, fatigue washing over her. We did what was necessary. Yes, we did. Varen seemed to be wrestling with something. Finally, he said, I didn't understand before. Why Earth produces soldiers like you? I thought it was just the harsh conditions, the evolutionary pressure. But it's more than that, isn't it? It's what those conditions taught your people over generations. Which is? That survival sometimes requires terrible choices. That mercy can take forms that look like cruelty to those who've never had to fight. He met her gaze. I judged you for your methods, but I was wrong. The Solari are alive because you were willing to make choices I couldn't have made. Kincaid studied her lieutenant, the man who had once embodied everything she found frustrating about Coalition idealism. Does this mean you're embracing your inner Deathworlder, Lieutenant? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Let's say I'm recognizing its value in a universe that isn't always as civilized as we pretend. 3 weeks later, against medical advice, Captain Kincaid stood at attention before the Galactic Relief Consortium's Grand Council. The vast chamber, with its soaring crystal arches and ambient light designed to be comfortable for all member species, had never felt so cold to her. Representatives from 100 worlds watched from tiered seating as Ambassador Thex read the formal inquiry findings. Humans were conspicuously underrepresented in the audience, a political statement that wasn't lost on Kincaid. The actions of the Earth vessel Ironblood, while ultimately contributing to the salvation of the Solari people, involved multiple violations of coalition weapons protocols, engagement regulations, and chain of command procedures. Thex droned. The Council finds that Captain Mara Kincaid acted with blatant disregard for established peacekeeping doctrine. In the gallery, Ambassador Rova sat with a delegation of Solari officials. Their expressions remained carefully neutral, though Kincaid could see tension in their posture. However, Thex continued, clearly uncomfortable with this portion of the statement. In light of the extraordinary circumstances and the testimonials provided by the Solari government, the Council has determined that punitive measures would be counterproductive. A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. Kincaid maintained her rigid posture, face expressionless. Therefore, Captain Kincaid is hereby reinstated to full duty, with the following conditions. The Ironblood will remain under Coalition oversight for a probationary period of 1 standard year. All weapons modifications not in compliance with Coalition standards will be removed and catalogued, and a Coalition observer will be assigned to the vessel to ensure adherence to protocols. Thex peered at Kincaid over his reading tablet. Do you understand these conditions, Captain?
I do, Ambassador.
Her voice carried clearly through the chamber. Then this council session is...
If I may address the council before we conclude?
The voice came not from Kincaid, but from Ambassador Rova, who had risen from her seat. Thex looked startled. This is irregular, Ambassador Rova, but given your people's recent trauma, the chair recognizes the Solari delegation. Rova moved to the central speaking platform with that new, purposeful stride that still maintained Solari grace. She wore traditional garments, but Kincaid noticed subtle modifications, reinforced fabric at key points, hidden pockets that likely contained emergency tools or weapons. The changes would be invisible to most, but to a Deathworlder's trained eye, they spoke volumes. Esteemed representatives, Rova began, her melodic voice carrying effortlessly. My people have existed for millennia as pacifists. We believed that violence was a failing, a breakdown of civilization. We were wrong. Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. Not wrong to value peace, Rova clarified, but wrong to believe that peace can exist without the capacity to defend it. The Zyron taught us that there are predators in our galaxy who see gentleness as weakness, and weakness as an invitation. She gestured toward Kincaid. The humans of Earth understood this reality in a way we could not. They evolved on a world that tested them daily, that forged in them both the capacity for terrible violence and the moral strength to direct that violence in defense of others. Rova turned slowly, making eye contact with representatives from various worlds. The Solari Confederation formally requests that the Coalition establish a joint Human-Solari defense initiative. We wish to learn from Earth's Deathworlders, not to become them, but to understand enough of their ways to ensure our survival in a galaxy that is not as enlightened as this council pretends. The chamber erupted in voices, objections, questions, expressions of support. Ambassador Thex struggled to restore order, his scales flushing with stress colors. When the clamor finally subsided, Thex addressed Rova directly. Ambassador, what you propose would fundamentally alter the Solari status within the Coalition. Your people have always been classified as a protected pacifist species. Classifications change when realities change. Rova replied simply. We have already begun the process of adapting. The question is whether the Coalition will recognize and support this evolution, or force us to seek assistance elsewhere. The implicit threat hung in the air. If the Coalition refused, the Solari might form a direct alliance with Earth, potentially shifting the delicate balance of power that kept human military expansion in check. After a lengthy deliberation, during which Kincaid remained at attention despite the protest of her healing wounds, The Council reached a decision. The Solari request would be granted, with strict oversight. Human military advisors would be permitted to establish training facilities on Solari worlds, teaching defensive tactics only. As the session concluded, Kincaid found herself approached by Ambassador Rova and Lieutenant Varen.
A successful outcome, Rova observed. Though I suspect not entirely to your satisfaction, Captain.
Kincaid allowed herself a small smile. Politics rarely satisfies anyone completely, Ambassador, but it's a start. Indeed. Rova hesitated, then asked, "Will you accept the position of lead military advisor to my people? We trust you, despite, or perhaps because of, the methods you employed to save us." The request surprised Kincaid. "My place is on the Ironblood. The ship will be in space dock for months," Varen pointed out. "And afterward, well, I suspect the Coalition will be hesitant to give you frontline assignments for some time." "Political exile," Kincaid translated wryly.
"Or an opportunity," Rova suggested. "To shape a new kind of defender, one that balances Deathworlder strength with Solari values."
As Kincaid considered the offer, her gaze drifted to the Council Chamber's enormous viewport. Beyond it, the jewel-like orbs of Coalition member worlds rotated serenely in their orbits. Peaceful, protected. For now. The Zyron had been defeated, but not destroyed. Their remaining forces had retreated to unknown regions, presumably to rebuild. And there were other threats lurking in the darkness between stars. Predators watching for signs of weakness, of division. "I'll do it," Kincaid decided. "But not just to teach the Solari. The entire Coalition needs to learn what my people know instinctively, that peace isn't the absence of violence. It's the judicious application of strength to deter those who would destroy it." Varen raised an eyebrow. "Careful, Captain. Talk like that could be interpreted as Earth making a play for greater influence." "Isn't it?" Kincaid asked bluntly. "The Coalition abandoned the Solari when they needed help most. We didn't. That creates a debt and an opening."
"For what?"
Rova asked quietly. Kincaid looked between the Solari ambassador and her human lieutenant, representatives of the two approaches to galactic civilization. "For a new balance. One where the Coalition's ideals are backed by Deathworlder resolve. One where mercy through strength becomes the foundation of peace." As they left the Council chamber together, Kincaid felt the weight of possibilities stretching before them. The galaxy would never view humans the same way again, not as crude savages to be tolerated, but as necessary guardians with the will to do what more civilized species could not. Whether that made them heroes or conquerors would depend on the choices they made in the years to come, and on whether the Coalition learned the lesson that the Solari had paid for in blood, that in a universe of predators and prey, sometimes salvation came only through destruction. Kincaid intended to make sure they learned it well.